All right, I want to welcome on my next guest. We have our first recurring guest. First time ever. We got Marc Sessler, Around the NFL podcast, NFL.com, NFL Media, NFL Network, NFL everything. They still have Europe? Is it still a thing, NFL Europe? No? Is it?
I mean, I think the growing in Europe is a huge
Yeah.
it's a huge thing for the NFL to attempt to do, and I think they're doing that to some
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like the kind of like the G League-ish kind of thing they used to have. That's
Oh, I wish that was still around. Like
yeah.
that, those were fun to watch, like in lazy days in April, where you'd
Yeah.
see like a quarterback that would be picked up a couple months later in training camp. And I think the XFL was attempting to be that. And then a pandemic struck and the XFL went the way of into a garbage can,
Yeah.
basically. So
Yeah. I mean, like Haskins would star in Venice if they had a team.
he
So
would.
yeah, in Italy. So we're about to approach week 6 NFL season. We only had one outbreak, but it's been a long one. What have been your thoughts so far? What do you think is the biggest storyline right now at this point in the year?
Well, I mean, I think that the Corona thing is a huge storyline just because we were wondering all along what impact would it have. And like, I think it was pretty popular to say the season would start on time, whether it would finish is entirely a different topic. But the NFL gets a good grade from me, and I think most people, for putting in place really strong guidelines that they've flexibly changed and improved along the way as they've hit some bumps. But then the nature of this stuff is that there have been issues, and we came real close to having. I think if another team or two had an outbreak last week or over the last 2 weeks, it could have thrown things into a hellish landscape. And that's sort of just the problem, is the lack of flexibility in the schedule. And, I guess there's talks, they don't want to do this, but there's talks of adding that extra week to the season to undo some of the complications around it. But it's just a very surreal year, because I feel like every time I log on to Twitter or Roto World or anything, just where I'd get my news, like what's happened, what outbreaks have occurred. And like, it's almost a surprise when there isn't anything these days. So, we're heading into what they are saying is the rougher part of the fall for all of this. And so the best the teams can get to bubbling. And I think they're trying to do that without it obviously being official, because they've got families and kids. And I think we forget these players and coaches have huge lives outside of the complexes that they work in a number of hours a day. So bubbling just is not an option until you get to the playoffs, and you got to hope for the best. And if you have to leave a couple teams behind, if something really serious happened, it's a weird year, just the way it goes. I think that they're just the wanting to avoid that is the key, to keep it a season without like a huge asterisk attached to it.
Yeah, if the Jets have played their last game, I don't think anybody's going to be really overthinking it, because we haven't really seen anybody in New York. But the one thing I keep thinking is, okay, I've seen Florio tweeting about it, and I don't know if it's just him. He's been talking about having like the home base bubbles. And I know the players don't want to do that. I mean, I understand it completely. It sounds horrible, even though it's probably a nice hotel. But do you think they could implement that? Like if a team has an outbreak, they're in the home base bubble?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like a hotel situation is probably the most realistic way to go. But my takeaway is sort of that the league and everyone has to be really fluid, and like that they don't have all these plans in place, because we didn't know a month ago what the last month would have looked like and what the real needs would be, because had things been smooth, it's like, well, we don't need to have these teams like living in hotels necessarily. And I mean, you get worried about like the team that suddenly is onto an interim head coach with a third string quarterback, and it's you're 0-8 or whatever, and maybe life priorities, just because there's a human element into this change. But most coaches have said that they haven't had to kind of scold the players, that the players are to a largely are very professional, and there's probably some veterans telling the younger guys like take this super seriously. But I mean, I just think of myself, like I want to go see friends, I want to go do things, and like, can you imagine? It's like I can understand why I'm not supposed to be doing that. But if I were like a 22-year-old, most largely famous because of my athletic skills and had millions of dollars, I mean, there are other temptations coming to you. I have none coming to me on that front. So you can kind of fend it all off,
Yeah, especially as teams soon fall more out of playoff contention, then
Exactly.
like some of these rookies, like, hey, you're not really playing for anything. The season's a wash. they might think, oh, I got better things to do, and then that could be disaster. So you
And
got to.
that only needs to be like 2% of your roster. It's not like the whole group is doing that. I mean, there are guys who are on IR, but still around the complex working out. You've got practice squad guys that maybe see their window of getting in the lineup changing or diminishing. And so maybe, it just takes one or two people to decide, let's go do something else tonight than stay in our lonely, quiet apartment.
So heading into week 6, who do you think is the most surprising team so far in the NFL?
I mean, there's surprising teams that are bad. Like but if you want to spin it positive,
let's go positive.
I shouldn't be surprised by the Rams, but I am surprised by the fact that they're not just sort of hanging around as I think they're a legit strong playoff contender and team. I think that Goff's being better protected this year, and McVay has switched that offense up. They're based off of throwing to tight ends now. They're run heavy. Goff's yards per attempt are low, but it's because they're a yard after the catch type of team, and they have the right kind of roster right now. And you've got Aaron Donald, and they just seem to have, this sort of feels like Rams 2.0 to me. And the 4-1 record, look at, you've beaten, we get that they've gone and beaten essentially a bunch of
the
nobodies.
NFC East.
The NFC East.
The entire NFC East they beat.
The NFC East. And I really didn't like their first their game against the Giants. They kind of didn't show up there to me a little bit, but they found their way out of that game with some big plays. And so I think they're better than, just a team that's wiping up on a bad division. They're a surprise because I would have seen them as like 2 or 3 at this point and not had a huge problem with that. Browns are a little surprising. Yeah. I mean, I think that it shouldn't be because of their talent, but they were definitely a team that you could have said, look at rookie head coach, a lot of moving parts, some personalities there, and their schedule isn't the worst. But after that Baltimore game, to turn around and do what they've done, I think that most people would say we weren't seeing that coming. I wasn't, as someone that follows the Browns pretty closely. I've been impressed with how organized they've looked.
What do you expect this week against Pittsburgh?
I think it's like, that's, there's just to me as a Browns follower and fan for my life, like there's just this huge psychological edge. I was just looking at these numbers and, I lived through these games. This past, century has been awful for Cleveland, but it gets worse when you look Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Baltimore, Cleveland. I mean, they are 18-3, the Steelers against the Browns in the 2000s and 16-3-1 from 2010 until now. And I mean, it's hard to go through. I was looking at individual scores. I remember this game from 2005 that was 41-0. I mean, those games just would be peppered into bad Brown seasons. And the most disgraceful thing about it is that the rivalry does not exist that way. And so, you have to make this a game where Steelers fans look at the Browns on their schedule and think differently. Well, this would be a chance because you're 4-1, and it's a legit 4-1 because of the way they play, because their offensive line is rough and tumble, because they can run the ball, because their defense isn't very good, but they've got a couple stars on defense and they've generated some turnovers. And guys like Odell Beckham are playing like Odell Beckham in big spots. So I think if I'm a Steelers fan, I'm thinking this isn't those teams that we beat up on for two decades. That said, I don't like the situation at all for Cleveland going into Pittsburgh ever until I kind of see it differently. But they played him close a couple times. Baker Mayfield is banged up right now. I don't think I know by the time this comes out, we'll have more clarity on that. Yeah. But on today he's limited in practice. And I mean, he looked to be playing through pain, and the Pittsburgh's defensive line, I mean, TJ Watt and the rest of them are thinking, we are going to hit him endlessly from wire to wire.
Which team do you think more people will be taking seriously if they win that game between Pittsburgh and Cleveland?
Well, I think that would be a huge check mark for the Browns and I think they'd have to go back and then circle around and deal with the Ravens in a professional manner. And then suddenly the sky's the limit. But if they went and beat Pittsburgh in this game, they came through this Colts scenario where it's the Colts defense, and then it would be the Pittsburgh experience. And I know that Dallas looks like a hot mess, but going into Dallas, if you're the Cleveland Browns and on national TV and taking out Dallas, that's an image change. It's all perception. It's a perception altering type of win. I think it would help the Browns tremendously. I think if the Steelers win, it's kind of like This is an undefeated Steelers team
Yeah.
with a lot of talent. They might have the best defense in the AFC. They've got all sorts of guys on offense. So it wouldn't be like, whoa, we think totally differently about Pittsburgh. It'd probably be more like they put Cleveland back in their place as they've done 200 or 300 times during my lifetime.
So I have a question, just a hypothetical. I was thinking about the other day. It's not going to happen, but if it does, it'd be wild. If Andy Dalton takes the Dallas Cowboys to the Super Bowl, who is the starting quarterback next year in Dallas?
It's so tricky. I think it would really be much more of a Nick Foles type situation where it'd be this great story for a guy that like I've just completely dismissed, Andy Dalton 200 or 300 times. But I think if I can trust the words of Jerry and Stephen Jones the day after Dak got hurt, saying that he is our leader, he's part of this team from now into the future, he's our guy. Like I think they believe that. I think it got real tricky with the contract situation. Yeah. But the idea that they were just going to let him go after this year, I never really bought into that. I mean, he is like a legit nonstop top 7 quarterback to me. And so Andy Dalton, that would be a great story, but would you really trust Andy Dalton to do that into the future? I mean, Andy Dalton, I will say that coming in and showing the aggressive nature of throwing the deep ball, that they trusted him to do that. We might get a version of Andy Dalton in a good offense that we haven't before. I think we're going to get an interesting Andy Dalton.
That throw to Gallup to kind of end that game was incredible.
Right.
And a question, whose start are you more surprised by, the Packers or the Seahawks?
I would say the Packers. I didn't really buy into their record a year ago. I mean, I thought they were a playoff team, but then the way they
weren't beating San Fran last year. There was no chance.
They got smoked by San Francisco, and the way that happened, it was like more work to do. But and then all the stuff with Aaron Rodgers, and you could see another world where like Aaron Rodgers is really annoyed right now, and Love is getting snaps or being brought in as like a gadget player left and right, and instead we have Aaron Rodgers from 5 or 6 years ago looking like the best quarterback around. And so that development was not what we were expecting 3 months ago. So that the nature of that is more surprising. I think they're a legit NFC title team that could go win a Super Bowl.
Do you think Aaron Rodgers appearing on your colleague Kyle Brands being his first podcast guest maybe just turn the whole season around?
It might have. Kyle has that kind of power. And I thought that, that kind of like I like watching that because Aaron Rodgers answered those questions really honestly about like when you see your team go draft. That's kind of when I was wondering what the future was, because Aaron Rodgers acknowledged like when a team goes and picks the number 1 quarterback, is it that I'm going to fend him off for 4 years and they have plans around me? Or is it more likely that I won't be here sooner than later? And he answered the latter. He said, it's probably the latter. I mean, he's pretty realistic about that. But I think now, you look at Love and he's probably more in a Jimmy G scenario where if this is the Aaron Rodgers we're going to get down the road, then Love is just simply a nice depth, but at some point he could be shopped.
Are the Bears for real?
I don't buy into the Bears just because I think it's 2020 and, they average, they hover below just around 20 points a game on offense. I think they've been a defensive oriented team like since the beginning of time. And I mean, they're going to win games like they did on Thursday against the Bucs. I think that they're like a 3-2 team that's 4-1 and could finish 9-7. I don't trust the quarterback play there at all. I mean, I feel like Allen Robinson's he's probably frustrated, but I think he and Foles could work together well. But I look at the whole organization and feel like the general manager has taken them in the reverse direction with too many of his moves, not forward. And Matt Nagy, do I think that he's up there with the Kyle Shanahans and the Matt LaFleurs and the Sean Paytons? We're just not seeing it. Like the team lacks identity versus having an identity on offense.
Also, wearing a visor when you're bald when it's 10 o'clock at night really doesn't really inspire much confidence in me.
Personal choice.
Yeah, I'm like, what do you like? What kind of protection are you getting? But which 1-4 team do you have the highest hopes for this year? Houston, Minnesota, pretty sure they're 4-4, or the Chargers?
Well, in terms of like where they're going to finish, I'd say maybe Minnesota can work their way out of some issues, but the team I'm most excited about that suddenly feels like it has no ceiling is the Chargers with Justin Herbert. I mean, I think that we are introduced to 5 or 6 new quarterbacks a year, and some of them look like projects. Some of them have these moments that make you believe, and Justin Herbert is just like, oh yeah, he's going to be great. Like the way he throws the ball and the way he uses his size and frame, and he's just tough. And I'm not a huge college football guy. So, and I think that like his evaluations were maybe misrepresented by some because he was in an offense that didn't do what the Chargers are having him do right now. But I mean, that I think it's maybe the prettiest. He may be the prettiest passer around. I'm trying to think of whose passes I like more. Aaron Rodgers can do it. I mean, they can all do it, but there's something about him that doing this in this, fourth start. And he did it earlier on too. I mean, just that I think if you're a Chargers fan, win, loss, like the future is bright. This is a team that went from Drew Brees seamlessly to Phillip Rivers. And then, thanks to a medical gaffe that kept Tyrod Taylor out of the lineup.
Conspiracy. I wonder if he paid the doctor. We'll never know.
We'll never know the story behind that one, but it feels very Tyrod Taylor-ish to be removed in that fashion. And it's like everyone loves Tyrod Taylor, and it's problematic that happened, but that's sort of the way these NFL storylines occur. Is Tyrod Taylor is, mismanaged with a needle, and suddenly Justin Herbert, who I thought would take who needed the time away to learn, comes in and lights the place up. So that's destiny. And I mean, that's a pretty good 3 quarterbacks in a row for Chargers fans to enjoy, despite the fact that the team, I think, is 3-13 in 1-score games over the last 2 years. It's no one else is doing that.
I have a question. I've never been to LA. There's a lot of billboards in LA, right? I'm assuming a lot of billboards.
Oh, they're all over the place.
Okay. When is AccuView going to sign Justin Herbert and get that stuff off his face? Because that's an amazing opportunity for everyone. So
I don't know about that. I mean, everyone jumps on these things, but it's like, you remember how young these guys are. I mean, I think it's like these people aren't 35 years old. They're still, some of them are still growing. So, I mean, if Justin Herbert can't get any bigger, he's like 6'6".
Who do you think is this year's Titans?
Well, I mean, I think that could be a team like the Browns. I mean, that you didn't really see coming, and we're talking run heavy team that when Chubb gets healthy, that's built to succeed in January. But because I'm kind of a Browns guy, that just feels like I'm just saying that. But if you want to, I would want to say the Raiders maybe.
Interesting.
Because the Raiders, to me, if they can play the way they did, they just did what the Browns need to do, which is they got through a rival that has just dismissed them for so long. And it's the Patrick Mahomes version of that. And I think it answered a lot of doubts and questions about Derek Carr. I mean, I think those doubts still linger, but to see what he did in that game, when they're playing well, I mean, they knocked out the Saints, they've beaten the Chiefs. That has to put you in legit territory. Yeah. And I think Gruden, I had my doubts when he returned. This is a pretty good football coach. I liked Gruden, and they've got the parts to be, when they win, they're kind of fun to watch, and they beat up on people, and they've got some parts on offense that make them interesting. The defense played a little bit better in Kansas City than we'd expect. So that maybe that's the team, because truly, even talent-wise, no one saw that coming from the Raiders this season to this degree, if they got to the AFC title game.
Yeah. Who do you think is a better quarterback in waiting, the Raiders and Nathan Peterman, or the Dolphins and Tua?
Well, I mean, I don't wait on Nathan Peterman at this point. So.
I wait every week. I'm like, all right, when are you going to pull the trigger? We need to see it. I would watch. It'd be better than Red Zone. And Red Zone, I think, is the best thing since sliced bread. So Peterman zone would be incredible. Honestly, I wanted to see Peterman versus Jameis a couple weeks ago. We did not get that.
Oh, that'd be spicy.
It would have been incredible. And like the over unders and the spreads, the people be losing their minds at Vegas. Yeah, it's incredible. What about with Kyler Murray? Do you see Arizona as a real threat to anything, or do you think it's just a building year for them?
I would have a couple of weeks ago, but I think they came out of the gate hot, looking the way that we thought they would. A little out of sync on offense. They just seem like they're working through some things. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is being targeted at massive levels, and he's pulling it off. I mean, I think there's chemistry between those two. They helped close the game out together against the Jets last week, but they weren't necessarily. You can go. They talked about, Kyler Murray had the most passing yards he's had in a single game, but go watch that game, and I just wasn't that impressed with the Cardinals' offense. They weren't dominant by any stretch, and they've just lost Chandler Jones on defense, and I don't think Patrick Peterson is necessarily the same guy. So, they may be a year away from really maximizing like what they could be. And I don't think it's a matter of people figuring out Cliff Kingsbury's offense. I think they just haven't really gelled yet.
What are your top 3 landing spots for Le'Veon Bell?
Well, I think one would be nowhere, because he's making a lot of guaranteed money. And I think there's going to be people that who don't want the Le'Veon Bell experience right now, especially if they have a younger back that they can lean on. if I had to go number 2, I mean, there aren't that many teams that need like a starter right now. And like, if there was an injury, I think that could do it. People have talked about the Bears, but if I'm Le'Veon Bell, why do I want to go to the Bears? That would be my question. It's like, it's going to be part of it is like, where does Le'Veon Bell want to go? He wants to go and play for a Super Bowl team. So I always would throw New England to the mix, because New England, suddenly if you had Cam Newton and Le'Veon Bell would go to New England and play like 12 times better than he did for the Jets, because that just feels like the cursed nature of New York sports right now. I mean, I just would never put it beyond Bill Belichick to add. And I mean, they're the team that went after Antonio Brown. So why not be the team that goes after Le'Veon Bell?
What about the Rams?
Well, I think they've got 3 good running backs that they like, and they're definitely a committee backfield, and they seem to kind of change what they want to do depending on the opponent. So I don't know if you're Le'Veon Bell and you're thinking, where am I going to go be like a star? I just don't know if that works. I think had Detroit not signed Adrian Peterson, that would have been a landing spot, because you could have been like the dude. Just sort of looking around the league, though, I don't think there's a ton of spots. What about Tampa Bay, though? I mean, I know they've got
like 12.
They've got like 18 running backs, but I don't think any of them are really that great. Ronald Jones has had a couple good games, but if you suddenly had Tom Brady and Le'Veon Bell, again, that's just a huge upgrade, and you get rid of some of those other guys.
What about Buffalo? That was another one I kept thinking about. I don't know if he wants to go to Buffalo, but I feel like that'd be a great fit.
It'd be interesting. I mean, they've got Devin Singletary. I think that Zach Moss, when he gets healthy, is someone that they drafted for a reason. But if there were injuries there, I mean, I think like part of it is like, again, Le'Veon Bell making like $6 million guaranteed to do literally nothing right now, which he seems to like doing nothing. Yeah. So like, wait for the pristine. There's not a rush to join. He doesn't seem like he must play football this Sunday. So there's a big injury will occur, and there'll be a wide open spot for him, and then suddenly he can play hero.
Do you have any concerns about the Ravens' inability to be able to come back in games? I know they're against good teams, but we haven't seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like in the playoffs 2 years in a row when they struggled, in the Titans game has become this sort of like, are other teams approaching Baltimore the way that Tennessee did? And Lamar Jackson even mentioned that earlier in the season when they've been slowed down a little bit, that look like we're seeing a little bit of that. I don't know if you can ask Baltimore to be as dominant as they were a year ago. Yeah. I mean, they went 14-2. Everything went right. Yeah. Everyone was healthy right up until the playoffs. Then Mark Ingram was not fully healthy. Mark Andrews was not fully healthy. And then the Titans were just playing out of their minds and with kind of nothing to lose. And so I think that Baltimore maybe needs to not be in these situations where we're the number one bye. I mean, they want to be the number one bye, but it's like, everyone expects them to just roll. Like they maybe are a team that like it will be better for them to have a little bit of a lesser record to like and work through some games where they have to come back. But if you're 14-2 last year, I don't see a huge issue with comebacks, because until the playoff game, I mean, they waxed like 90% of the league.
Interesting. Do you think who has shown their age more this year between Brady and Breeze?
Oh, Breeze. I mean, I know Breeze they've both been quarterbacks that had like, here's a bad half followed by a good half, or flip that, and Breeze, it's happened on national television twice where I just don't think he's looked entirely healthy or himself. And you've got the coach pulling him off the field for Taysom Hill, or I think force feeding Taysom Hill, a player that I loved, leading up to this season, in a way that just did not look right against the Chargers. And I this is clearly the last season for Drew Brees, who already has a television deal lingering out there for Notre Dame football. And I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I feel like I see a look in Brees' eyes where he can kind of see it too. And quarterbacks, when it ends, it can go like this. And that's not the case with Brady. I mean, he's coming off a few games this season where he looks younger than he did a year ago and fresher. And I just kind of trust Tom Brady's like desire to play football from now until the end. He's not making plans for when he retires. I think when someone makes plans for post-playing career, I mean, that puts you in a whole different headspace.
Well, moving to Florida is plan 1. So
yeah, that is plan. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. And I have a question. So right now it's looking like Trevor Lawrence is going to be the number 1 pick. Which teams do you feel, besides Washington, because I think they're the writings on the wall, do you feel like are ready to abandon maybe a player they drafted in the last couple of years and are ready to go all in on Trevor Lawrence?
Well, I could see first from a veteran tradable angle, if the Falcons just went like 1-15 here, I think you could see them moving guys like Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and starting a whole new era. And if they were zeroing in on a coach that really loved Trevor Lawrence, that kind of thing could happen there. I know people keep talking about the Jets and Darnold, and
I don't see it.
I don't see that either. And I think that unless there was a swift regime change where, again, it was like the one reason there's kind of precedent for this is because of Kyler Murray. And when the early whispers came out that Cliff Kingsbury was thinking about, did he want Kyler Murray over Josh Rosen? It just seemed absurd to a lot of people because you don't ever move a first round quarterback after one season. But now we've seen that was actually, for that coach, like the right thing to do, and for that team, the right thing to do. And Josh Rosen has not gone on to some great career otherwise. I guess the circumstances obviously negative for him, but it's got to open up the mind. It's a copycat league, right? We know that. And so other GMs are thinking, well, wait a minute. I have this quarterback I'm going to have to suddenly, I think the part of it is like the Sam Darnold issue is like, how do you deal with Sam Darnold's next contract if this season goes the way it's going, and then next season is with a third or fourth offense that he's in, a new coaching staff, and you don't get a full read on him then? You've got to decide if you want to start picking up the fifth-year option, if you want to give him that extension sooner so it doesn't cost you more down the stretch. It's more than just like, is he playing well? And I feel like Daniel Jones could be another person that could be usurped, right? But I still would want to just see more from Daniel Jones. And so it puts you in a real tough spot because you got to get it right. Like the Cardinals look like they got it right. And I mean, Washington seems like they already have telling us what they're going to do, but you get no hint of that from New York. But we also have no idea who's going to be in charge in New York, either with either team, after this season. I think, Joe Judge, if he likes Daniel Jones, they're going to stick with him.
Interesting. And then have you looked into any of the other quarterbacks in this draft? I know the kid Lance is drawing a lot of attention as well as Justin Fields. Are any of them even close to Lawrence in your?
I think it's Lawrence and then the rest of them. And in our role, we pick up these players when they get drafted, because if I tacked on like Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday college games into this situation that I'm in with wife and kids home 24/7, I would quickly be living like in a studio apartment somewhere. So, but I mean, Trevor Lawrence just seems to be the thing that there's always this one quarterback that is the fascination of everyone before, he's even draft eligible.
Do you think he's the type of quarterback that's going to go to the team with the first pick, or do you think it could be a case like a couple of years ago when the Trubisky draft, when they traded up and Houston traded up, and is something like that kind of happen?
Well, it all depends, because I think it's if the Jets are that team right now. Joe Douglas, I mean, he's telling you, we will trade Jamal Adams for picks. We wanted to trade Lev Bell. I mean, we're dumping stars. And so why not? It would be great for him and a selling point to stick around if they could sit in that number one spot and trade it away, keep Sam Darnold, trade it away to another team for an absolute bundle. I mean, and then if you hit on those picks, you can say Joe Douglas is someone that can turn the Jets around.
Do you think that Jacksonville's happy with Minshew, or do you think if they had the top 2 pick, they'd grab him?
No, I would just assume they'd take Lawrence. I think Minshew's been really good for them, but I mean, it's you can't be the guy that did that. I think part of it is just there's too much pressure with Trevor Lawrence sitting out there to try to defend Gardner Minshew, a 6th-round starter, as your guy. And I mean, Minshew could start somewhere else. I'm not saying he's not a starter. I like Minshew, but I think that's when you get caught in the crosshairs, where those quarterbacks know that they're dead meat.
Yeah, especially when you have 2 quarterbacks like that with amazing flow, because I don't think that's ever been done before.
No, and I don't know if they could really be on the same locker room together. It's too much.
Yeah, especially the haircuts. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like
too much.
Yeah, it's incredible. It'd be the stylist in Jackson will be having a great day. And I got one last question for you. What's one more bold prediction for you for this season that we haven't, that something that you think is going to happen we haven't seen yet?
I think that Seattle is the Super Bowl team. I don't know if how bold that is, because I think just people kind of count them out. Here's another one. I think the Dolphins are going to sneak into the playoffs as the 7th wild card. And I think it's going to happen primarily and almost exclusively with Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Interesting.
And that I think that last wild card spot, if a few teams suffer injuries and stuff, will be obtainable. And I think the Dolphins are going to go on like kind of like a 5-6 game win streak and be the story of the AFC in November and December.
Interesting. I can't wait. Hopefully these guys are staying safe. I know Melvin Gordon got into some trouble today. Hopefully he's all good. But this has been a lot of fun. So how can people find you on social media if they're not already following you?
Just my name, Marc Sessler, MarcSessler at Twitter. We're on the Around the NFL podcast 3 times a week. That's easily findable on Twitter too. And, that's about it. Just write some articles here and there and, trying to get through this season.